Captain Kim Tae-ho walked through the military base with his head held high, even though most soldiers around him were twice his size. At barely 5 feet tall, he looked like a child among giants. The other alien soldiers towered over him like trees over a flower. Some reached 9 feet in height with muscles that could crush steel. Others had 4 arms and skin harder than armor. But Tae-ho had learned long ago that size did not win battles. Smart thinking did. The war against the Vorthan Empire had been going on for 3 terrible years. Every day brought news of another defeat. Every week, another human colony fell to the enemy. The Galactic Coalition was losing badly, and everyone knew it. The Vorthans had better weapons, bigger ships, and more soldiers than anyone could count. Their crystal ships could pass through solid matter like ghosts, making them almost impossible to hit. Tae-ho commanded the 47th Reconnaissance Unit, which other officers called the Tiny Humans, behind his back. His team of 12 soldiers was responsible for scouting enemy positions and gathering information. It was dangerous work that required being small and quiet. While the big alien soldiers charged into battle with heavy weapons, Tae-ho and his team crept through shadows and reported what they saw. The Coalition headquarters was built into a massive asteroid near the Centauri system. The main command center buzzed with activity as officers from dozens of different worlds planned their next moves. General Crix, a 10-foot-tall warrior from the Draxi homeworld, stood at the center of it all. His 4 arms moved across holographic displays, showing battle reports from across the galaxy. "Captain Kim," General Crix called out as Tae-ho entered the briefing room. "What news from the Vega sector?" Tae-ho stepped forward, ignoring the way other officers had to look down to see him. "Sir, the Vorthans have established 3 new forward bases on the outer planets. They are moving supplies and troops through the system every 6 hours. My team counted at least 200 ships in the last 48 hours. 200 ships, muttered Colonel Vex, a lizard-like officer whose scales changed color when he was angry. "We barely have 50 ships left in that entire sector." "What about their defenses?" asked General Crix. "Heavy, sir. Energy shields around each base. Patrol ships running constant sweeps, and their ships phase out of normal space every time our scanners try to lock onto them. But I noticed something interesting." The room fell quiet. Even though many officers looked down on humans as too small to matter, they had learned that Tae-ho often saw things others missed. "Go on, Captain," said General Crix. "The Vorthan ships follow exact timing patterns when they phase shift. Every movement is coordinated down to the second. They never act alone or make random moves. It's like they are all connected somehow." "Colonel," Vex hissed softly. "So what? Coordinated enemies are harder to fight, not easier." "Maybe," said Tae-ho. "But perfect coordination also means perfect predictability. If we can figure out their timing, we might find weaknesses." General Crix studied the tactical display. Red dots showed Vorthan positions spreading across dozens of star systems like a plague. Blue dots showed coalition forces retreating toward the core worlds. The situation looked hopeless. "Captain Kim, your observations are noted. But right now we need solutions, not theories. The Vorthans will reach the core systems in 6 months. At this rate, we need to stop them, not study their timing." Tae-ho nodded but said nothing more. He had learned that bigger officers often wanted simple answers to complex problems. They preferred to solve everything with more firepower and larger fleets. But humans had never won battles through superior size or strength. They won by thinking differently. After the briefing, Tae-ho returned to his small quarters to write his daily report. The room was barely large enough for a bed, desk, and communication terminal. Everything was built for larger species, making him feel even smaller than usual. But he had received a message from someone who mattered more than any general. "Tae-ho," came his sister's voice through the encrypted channel. Dr. Park So-young worked in the Coalition's Advanced Weapons Research Division on Kepler 442b, a planet so far from the front lines that most soldiers forgot it existed. "I got your report about the Vorthan coordination patterns. Very interesting. So-young, you should not be contacting me on military channels," Tae-ho said, though he smiled. His sister was 2 years older and 3 inches shorter, making her the smallest human in the coalition forces, but she had the biggest brain of anyone he knew. "I have clearance for scientific correspondence," she said. "Besides, what you observed about their timing matches something I have been working on here in the lab." "What kind of work?" "The kind that might change everything. But I need more data. Can you keep watching their patterns? Write down everything, even details that seem unimportant." "Of course. But So Young, be careful with whatever you are doing. The coalition leaders are desperate. They might approve dangerous experiments if they think it will help win the war. Let me worry about the science, little brother. You focus on staying alive out there." The connection ended, leaving Tae-ho alone with his thoughts. Through his small window, he could see coalition ships preparing for another doomed mission. Huge battleships carried weapons that could destroy planets, but they could not hit enemies that could phase through solid matter. Powerful shields protected them from energy weapons, but they were useless against attacks that came from other dimensions. Tae-ho pulled out his personal notebook and began writing down everything he had observed about Vorthan movement patterns. Other officers might dismiss his observations as unimportant, but So Young was different. She saw possibilities where others saw only problems. If anyone could find a way to use enemy coordination against them, it would be his brilliant sister. Outside his window, another coalition fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward what would probably be another defeat. The war was going badly, and everyone knew it. But somewhere in a distant laboratory, Dr. Park So-young was working on something that might change everything. And Captain Kim Tae-ho would keep gathering the information she needed, no matter how small and unimportant others thought it was. The universe was about to learn that the smallest people sometimes carried the biggest solutions. Dr. Park So-young stared at the holographic display showing the inside of a captured Vorthan crystal fragment. The piece was no bigger than her thumb, but it had taken 3 months and the loss of an entire coalition strike team to obtain it. Around her, the research laboratory hummed with quiet activity, as scientists from 12 different worlds worked on various projects. Most of them were trying to copy Vorthan technology. So-young was doing something different. "The quantum signature is unlike anything we have seen before," said Lee Min-ho, her research partner. Min-ho came from the same human colony as So-young, and at 4 feet 11 inches he was one of the few people in the lab shorter than her. "The crystal exists in at least 7 different dimensional states at the same time. That is why their ships can phase through our weapons," added Choi Hae-won, the team's engineer. Hae-won was taller at 5 feet 6 inches, but still tiny compared to most coalition personnel. "When we fire at them, they simply shift to a dimension where our weapons do not exist, so..." Young nodded, but her mind was working on a different problem. For weeks she had been thinking about what her brother Tae-ho had told her about Vorthan coordination. Every ship moved in perfect timing with every other ship. No mistakes, no delays, no individual decisions. It was like they were all connected by invisible strings. "Min-ho, what would happen if we could cut those strings?" "What strings?" "The dimensional connections that let them coordinate. Look at this data." So-young pulled up readings from the crystal fragment. "See these energy patterns? They repeat every 4.7 seconds. That is not random. It is a signal." Hae-won leaned closer to study the display. "You think their ships are all connected through dimensional space?" "I think they have to be. Perfect coordination across thousands of ships spread across light years of space? That is impossible unless they share some kind of quantum link." The 3 humans worked through the night, analyzing data that other research teams had ignored. While everyone else focused on how to copy Vorthan phase technology, So-young's team looked for ways to break it. By morning, they had a theory that would have seemed crazy to anyone else. "If we could generate a quantum cascade that targets their dimensional anchor points," So-young explained to her teammates, "we might be able to collapse their ability to phase shift, not just for one ship, but for their entire connected network." "That would require massive amounts of energy," said Min-ho, "more than our biggest battle stations can produce." "Not if we use their own network against them. During their synchronized movements, they create a temporary dimensional bridge between all their ships. If we could introduce the right kind of Quantum disruption at the exact moment of synchronization. The cascade would spread through their entire fleet, finished Haywan, like a virus spreading through a computer network. So-Young smiled. It was the first time she had felt hopeful in months. Exactly. We do not need to destroy each ship individually. We just need to collapse the quantum foundation that lets them exist in multiple dimensions. The team spent the next 2 weeks developing their theory into actual mathematics. The equations were so complex that even their advanced computers struggled to process them. Other research teams began to notice their work and started asking questions. Dr. Vorthak, the 8-foot-tall head of weapons research, summoned So-Young to his office. His 4 eyes studied her with barely hidden contempt. Like most coalition leadership, he saw humans as useful for small tasks but incapable of major breakthroughs. Dr. Park, I understand you are working on some kind of theoretical weapon, Dr. Vorthak said. I hope you are not wasting coalition resources on impossible projects. The mathematics are sound, sir. We have run thousands of simulations. Simulations are not reality. Show me a working prototype or abandon this project and return to useful work. So-Young felt her heart sink. A prototype would require materials and energy that only Coalition Command could authorize. And Coalition Command never listened to ideas from humans, especially not ideas that sounded impossible. That night, she sent an encrypted message to her brother Tae-ho. They want us to stop working on the project. They think it is impossible. Tae-ho's reply came back within hours. So-Young, I have been watching the Vorthons for 3 more weeks. Your theory about their timing is correct. Every 72 hours, their entire fleet synchronizes for exactly 17 minutes. During that time, they move as one massive formation. If your weapon could work, that would be the perfect moment to use it. But they will never let us build it. Dr. Vorthak thinks humans are too small to solve big problems. Then we make it a small problem with a big solution. Keep working on the mathematics. I will keep watching their patterns. When the coalition gets desperate enough, they will listen to anyone with answers. So-Young did not have to wait long. 3 days later, news arrived that changed everything. The coalition fleet had suffered its worst defeat yet at the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Over 300 ships destroyed, including 2 of their largest battle stations. The Vorthon advance had accelerated, and coalition forces were retreating toward the core worlds faster than ever. General Crix himself arrived at the research facility, his forearms gesturing frantically as he addressed the assembled scientists. We need weapons, and we need them now. Any project that might help win this war gets unlimited funding and resources. I do not care how crazy it sounds. Dr. Vorthak stood up first. General, we have several promising conventional weapons projects that could be ready in 6 months. 6 months? The war will be over in 6 months and we will have lost it. What else do you have? So-Young felt her heart pounding as she raised her hand. Every eye in the room turned toward the tiny human scientist. General, we have a theoretical weapon that could destroy entire Vorthon fleets, but it would need to be tested within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? How? The weapon targets the quantum foundation of their phase shift technology. It could cascade through their entire connected network during their synchronized movements. The room fell silent. Dr. Vorthak's 4 eyes glared at So-Young with anger and embarrassment. Other scientists whispered among themselves about impossible theories and desperate humans. General Crix studied So-Young for a long moment. Dr. Park, you have 2 weeks and unlimited resources. If your weapon works, you will save the coalition. If it fails, we are no worse off than we are now. So-Young bowed deeply. Thank you, General. We will not waste this opportunity. As the meeting ended and other scientists filed out, So-Young felt the weight of the entire war settling on her small shoulders. She had 2 weeks to build something that might be impossible, but her brother was right about one thing. Sometimes small people had to solve big problems because no one else was looking for small solutions. So-Young and her team worked without sleep for 14 straight days. The laboratory became their entire world, as they raced to build something that most scientists still believed was impossible. The quantum cascade disruptor took shape slowly, one carefully crafted component at a time. When it was finished, the device looked nothing like the massive weapons most people expected. It was small enough to fit in a briefcase, with smooth metal surfaces and glowing blue crystals arranged in complex patterns. "That is it?" asked Haywan, staring at the device. "Something so small is supposed to destroy an entire Vorthon fleet?" "Size does not matter," replied So Young. "What matters is being in the right place at the right time. The disruptor needs to be activated at the exact center of the Vorthon fleet's dimensional network during their synchronization phase." Minho ran his hands through his hair, exhausted from 2 weeks of constant work. "But how do we get it there?" "The Vorthons will be expecting an attack during their vulnerable moment. They will have thousands of ships protecting the center of their formation." So Young had been thinking about the same problem for days. Traditional delivery methods would never work. Coalition missiles could not get close enough before being destroyed. Teleportation technology was not accurate enough for the precise placement they needed, and any large attack force would be detected long before reaching the target. "We need someone to carry it manually," she said finally. "Someone who can pilot a small ship through their formation without being detected." "That is suicide," said Haywan. "Even if someone could get past their defenses, they would be trapped inside the fleet when the cascade activates. The quantum disruption will affect everything within a 50-kilometer radius." So Young nodded sadly. She had run the calculations dozens of times, hoping to find a way to make the mission survivable. There was none. Whoever delivered the weapon would not be coming back. The completed device sat on the laboratory table like a monument to impossible choices. So Young sent a message to her brother Tae-ho, telling him about their success and the terrible requirement for manual delivery. His response came back within hours. "So Young, I volunteer for the mission. My reconnaissance ship is small enough to avoid detection, and I know Vorthon patrol patterns better than anyone. Do not try to talk me out of this. It is my choice to make. No." So Young typed back immediately. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself for my weapon. There has to be another way. There is no other way, and you know it. Besides, I am a soldier. This is what soldiers do." But So Young was already working on a different plan. While Tai-ho assumed he would pilot the mission, she had been secretly modifying a prototype stealth ship called the Hanyul. The ship used principles from her quantum research, allowing it to briefly exist in the same dimensional space as phase-shifted Vorthon vessels. Only she understood the modifications well enough to pilot it successfully. Coalition Command summoned So Young for a final briefing 2 days before the next Vorthon synchronization window. General Crick stood before a holographic display showing the enemy fleet's projected position. Over 12,000 ships would be moving together in perfect coordination, creating the largest military target in galactic history. "Dr. Park, is your weapon ready?" asked the general. "Yes, sir. The quantum cascade disruptor is complete and tested, but the delivery method presents significant challenges." "Explain." "The device must be activated at the exact center of their formation during the 17-minute synchronization window. This requires manual placement by someone who understands both the weapon and the dimensional physics involved." Colonel Vex, the lizard-like officer, hissed softly. "You are asking for a volunteer suicide mission." "I am afraid so, sir. The quantum cascade cannot be controlled once it begins. Whoever makes the delivery will not survive." General Crix studied the tactical display. The Vorthon fleet represented the last major military force of their empire. If the weapon worked, the war would end instantly. If it failed, the coalition would have no more chances. "Dr. Park, we cannot order anyone to undertake this mission. We need a volunteer who understands the risks." "I volunteer," said a familiar voice from the back of the briefing room. Tae-ho stepped forward, still wearing his reconnaissance unit uniform. "I have studied Vorthon fleet movements for months. I know their patterns better than anyone." "Captain Kim, you are too valuable as a field commander," said General Crix. "We need experienced officers for the battles ahead." "General, with respect, there will be no battles ahead if this mission fails. Let me do what needs to be done." So Young watched her brother volunteer for certain death and felt her heart breaking. But she had already made her own decision. That night, while Taeho prepared for a mission he would never fly, So-young made final preparations to the Hanul. Her modifications were too complex for anyone else to understand or operate safely. She recorded a message for her brother and set it to transmit automatically when her ship launched. Taeho, by the time you see this, I will already be gone. The Hanul can only be piloted by someone who understands its dimensional modifications. That someone is me, not you. I know, you will be angry, but this is not about sacrifice. This is about using the right person for the right job. You taught me that our size was never our weakness. It was what let us see solutions others missed. Well, I see the solution now, and it requires me to take the biggest step of my life. Tell the coalition that Dr. Park So-young kept her promise. Tell the universe that humans may be small, but we are not weak. And tell everyone who will listen that sometimes the smallest person must carry the heaviest burden. So-young sealed the message and began her final equipment checks. The quantum cascade disruptor sat secured in the Hanul's cargo bay, its blue crystals glowing softly in the dim light. In 18 hours, the Vorthon fleet would begin their synchronization sequence. In 19 hours, the war would either be over, or the coalition would face inevitable defeat. She thought about her childhood with Taeho on their small colony world. They had always been the smallest children in school, often picked on by larger kids from other species. But they had learned to rely on each other and on their ability to think differently. Now that same partnership would either save the galaxy or die trying. The Hanul's engines hummed to life as So-young completed her pre-flight checklist. Through the hangar bay windows, she could see coalition ships preparing for what might be their final battle. Large battleships and massive carriers, filled with brave soldiers who would fight to the end. But the real battle would be fought by one small woman in one small ship, carrying one small device that could change everything. So-young whispered a prayer to ancestors she had never met and pushed the launch button. The Hanul slipped quietly, out of the hangar bay and into the darkness of space, beginning its journey toward the largest enemy fleet in galactic history. Taeho discovered his sister's deception 3 hours after the Hanul disappeared from coalition sensors. Her recorded message played in his quarters while he sat in stunned silence, watching her face explain why she had stolen his mission and his chance to save the galaxy. By the time the message ended, So-young was already halfway to the Vorthon fleet, flying through hyperspace in a ship only she knew how to operate. Stupid, brilliant sister, he whispered to the empty room. Part of him was angry that she had deceived him. Part of him was proud that she had found a way to pilot the mission herself. All of him was terrified that he would never see her again. Coalition. Command erupted in chaos when they learned what had happened. General Crick summoned every available officer to an emergency meeting, his forearms gesturing wildly as he tried to understand how a tiny human scientist had managed to steal their most important mission. "How did she get past our security?" demanded Colonel Vex. "The hangar bay has multiple checkpoints and sensor arrays." Dr. Park had unlimited access authorization for her research, explained the duty officer. Her clearance codes opened every door and disabled every alarm. By the time we realized what was happening, she was already in hyperspace. Taeho stood at the back of the briefing room, feeling helpless for the first time in his military career. His sister was flying towards certain death, and there was nothing he could do to help her. The coalition fleet was too far away to provide support, and no ship could catch the Hanul once it reached the Vorthon formation. "What is the status of our fleet deployment?" asked General Crix. "All available ships are in position around the outer marker buoys," reported Admiral Chen, a human officer from Earth's colonial fleet. "If Dr. Park's weapon fails, we are ready to engage the Vorthons when they break synchronization. It will not be enough to stop them, but we can delay their advance." Taeho listened to the tactical discussions with growing dread. Everyone was planning for failure, preparing for a final desperate battle that would only slow down the inevitable. Only So-young believed her weapon would actually work. Only she had the courage to bet everything on an impossible solution. 12. Hours later, coalition sensors detected the Vorthon fleet beginning their synchronization sequence. 12,000 crystalline ships moved into perfect formation. their phase shift drives creating ripples in space-time that could be detected from 50 light-years away. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, like watching the universe's most deadly ballet. "Hanul is approaching the outer edge of the formation," reported the sensor officer. "Stealth systems are functioning normally. The Vorthons do not appear to have detected her yet." On the main tactical display, a tiny blue dot representing So Young's ship crept toward the massive red cloud of enemy vessels. The scale was overwhelming. The Hanul was smaller than most Vorthon fighters, and there were thousands of those fighters protecting the formation's center. Taiho closed his eyes and tried to imagine what his sister was experiencing. She would be flying through a maze of enemy ships, each one capable of destroying her with a single shot. The Hanul's dimensional modifications would keep her hidden from most sensors, but one mistake or one unlucky patrol could end everything. "Message coming in from the Hanul," announced the communications officer. "Audio only, very weak signal." So Young's voice crackled through the static, sounding calm despite the impossible danger surrounding her. "Coalition Command, this is Dr. Park So Young aboard the Hanul. I have successfully penetrated the outer defense perimeter. The Vorthon's synchronization is even more precise than we calculated. Their ships are moving like parts of a single organism." "Dr. Park, what is your current position?" asked General Crix. "Approximately 37 kilometers from the formation center. I can see the main command vessels now. They are massive, each one the size of a small moon. The quantum readings are off the charts. When I activate the disruptor, the cascade should spread through their entire network in less than 15 seconds. Taiho stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "So Young, this is Taiho. Are you certain the weapon will work?" "Little brother, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The mathematics are perfect and the Vorthons have made themselves completely vulnerable. They trusted their coordination so much that they never considered it could become their weakness. Can you get out after activating the device?" There was a long pause before So Young answered. "The quantum cascade will collapse dimensional space within a 50-kilometer radius. The Hanul cannot phase shift fast enough to escape the effect zone. But Taiho, this is not about escape. This is about ending a war that has killed millions of people." Tears ran down Taiho's face as he listened to his sister prepare for sacrifice. "So Young, you do not have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way, and we both know it. But remember what I taught you when we were children. Sometimes the smallest person has to take the biggest step. Tell the universe that Park So Young took her step willingly." The tactical display showed the Hanul moving deeper into the Vorthon formation. Enemy ships surrounded So Young on all sides, their crystalline hulls glowing with phase shift energy. She was threading her way through the deadliest maze in galactic history, guided only by her understanding of dimensional physics and her determination to save everyone she loved. "Coalition Command, I am now at the formation center," So Young reported. "The quantum anchor point is exactly where our calculations predicted. I can see the dimensional threads connecting every ship in the fleet. They are beautiful and terrible at the same time. Dr. Park, you are authorized to activate the quantum cascade disruptor at your discretion," said General Crix formally. "Thank you, General. To all coalition forces, this is Dr. Park So Young making her final report. The weapon is armed and ready. In 60 seconds, this war will be over." So Young's voice changed, becoming softer and more personal. "Taiho, take care of yourself. Remember that our parents would be proud of both of us. Tell everyone that humans may be small, but we are not afraid. Tell the universe that Park So Young sends her regards." The communication channel went silent. On the tactical display, the tiny blue dot representing the Hanul stopped moving at the exact center of the Vorthon formation. 12,000 enemy ships continued their synchronized dance, unaware that death was waiting among them in the form of one small woman with one impossible weapon. Taiho held his breath and waited for his sister to change the galaxy forever. The universe held its breath for 17 minutes. Across coalition space, military commanders watched their sensors and waited for news from the Vorthon formation. Some prayed to their ancestors, others checked their weapons and prepared for a final desperate battle. All of them wondered if Dr. Park So-young would succeed in her impossible mission. Tae-ho stood in the Coalition Command Center, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The massive red cloud representing 12,000 enemy ships continued its synchronized movement, unaware that a human woman sat at its heart with a weapon that could destroy them all. The waiting was agony. "Any change in Vorthon fleet status?" asked General Crix. "Negative, sir. They are maintaining perfect formation and timing. No indication that they have detected the Hanul." Tae-ho closed his eyes and tried to imagine what So-young was thinking in those final moments. She would be running through her calculations one last time, making sure every setting was perfect. She had always been careful with her work, checking and double-checking every detail. Even facing death, she would want to be absolutely certain. Then it happened. The tactical display flickered once, showing a brief flash of brilliant white light at the center of the Vorthon formation. For a moment, nothing else changed. The enemy ships continued their movement exactly as before. Then the cascade began. Starting from the formation center, Vorthon ships began to simply disappear, not exploding or breaking apart, but vanishing completely as their quantum foundations collapsed. The effect spread outward like ripples on a pond, moving faster than light itself through the dimensional connections that bound the fleet together. "By the stars," whispered Admiral Chen. "It is working." Ship after ship winked out of existence as the quantum cascade spread through the Vorthon network. Massive battle cruisers that had terrorized coalition forces for 3 years ceased to exist. In seconds, carriers that held thousands of fighters vanished without a trace. Command ships the size of cities collapsed into dimensional voids and disappeared forever. The sensor officer's voice shook as he reported what everyone could see on the display. Vorthon fleet strength dropping rapidly. 8,000 ships remaining. 6,000. 4,000. 2,000. Tae-ho watched his sister's weapon destroy the most powerful military force in galactic history. Each disappearing ship represented the end of coalition suffering and the beginning of peace. But it also meant that So-young's sacrifice was real and final. The tiny blue dot of the Hanul had vanished with the first wave of the cascade. 1,000 ships remaining, reported the sensor officer. 500. 150. Then it was over. Where 12,000 Vorthon warships had dominated space only minutes before, nothing remained but empty darkness and floating debris. The quantum cascade had spread through their dimensional network exactly as So-young predicted, destroying every connected vessel in the span of 90 seconds. The Coalition Command Center fell completely silent. Officers from dozens of different worlds stared at the display, unable to believe what they had witnessed. The greatest military threat in galactic history had been eliminated by one small human woman with one impossible weapon. General Crix was the first to speak. "Communications, get me a channel to Vorthon High Command." "Sir, incoming transmission from the Vorthon homeworld. They are requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations." The war was over. After 3 years of desperate fighting and millions of casualties, peace had come in less than 2 minutes. But the cost of victory sat heavy in every human heart. Dr. Park So-young had saved the galaxy and died doing it. Over the following days, the full impact of So-young's sacrifice became clear. The Vorthon Empire, having lost their entire military, fleet and the quantum technology needed to rebuild it, sued for peace within hours. Their surrender terms were unconditional, ending not just the current war, but any possibility of future Vorthon aggression. Tae-ho found himself promoted to Coalition Admiral, but the honor felt hollow without his sister to share it. He kept her final transmission playing in his quarters, listening to her voice explain why the smallest person sometimes had to take the biggest step. Her words became his guide for every decision that followed. The quantum cascade disruptor was never rebuilt. So-young had designed it that way, encoding the construction details with quantum locks that died with her. No one else could understand her dimensional mathematics well enough to recreate the weapon. The galaxy's most powerful weapon had been used exactly once, by the only person who truly understood it. But the memory of what happened spread throughout coalition space and beyond. Within months, every military academy was teaching courses about the Battle of Vorthan synchronization. Children on distant worlds learned songs about the tiny human who ended the Great War. Alien species that had never heard of Earth began to speak respectfully of human courage and ingenuity. The story grew with each telling. Some versions described So Young as a giant among humans, forgetting that she had been barely 5 feet tall. Others claimed she had survived the cascade and lived secretly on a distant world. But the core truth remained unchanged in every version. One small woman had seen a solution that no one else could imagine, and she had sacrificed everything to save the galaxy. Taeho lived for 40 more years after the war ended, serving as Coalition Admiral and later as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. He never married, dedicating his life to ensuring that his sister's sacrifice led to lasting peace. On his deathbed, surrounded by friends from dozens of different worlds, his final words were about So Young. "She was right," he whispered to the assembled mourners. "Size was never our weakness. It was what let us see solutions others missed." The funeral drew representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Humans were no longer seen as too small to matter. They were recognized as the people who had ended the greatest war in galactic history, and their perspective was valued in every important decision. Centuries later, when new conflicts arose and seemed impossible to solve, military leaders still invoked the doctrine of Park So-young. Size is not strength, and strength is not victory. Victory comes to those who see what others cannot. The words became a reminder that the smallest voices sometimes carried the most important solutions. Children across the galaxy learned the story as part of their basic education. The small human who ended the Great War. The step that shook the universe. The woman who proved that courage and intelligence mattered more than size or strength. And in quiet moments, when facing impossible odds, people throughout coalition space would whisper the same prayer that So Young had spoken in her final transmission. "Tell the universe that we send our regards." The legend of Dr. Park So-young lived on, inspiring new generations to believe that no problem was too big for a small person with a brilliant mind and the courage to act. Her sacrifice had not just ended a war. It had changed the way the entire galaxy thought about what was possible. The universe had learned to fear not humanity's size or strength, but their ability to find solutions where none should exist, and their willingness to sacrifice everything to protect what they loved most. In the end, So Young had been right about one thing above all others. Sometimes the smallest person must take the biggest step, and when that step is taken with love, courage, and brilliant determination, it can change everything forever.